Hello, this is Will Faerber from Art to Ride, and today we're looking at the first submission by Lisa and her horse Tia. The first thing I'd say with this horse is what a lovely horse. This horse has lots and lots of potential. See a lot of good stuff going on here, but the problem is, as you say, she's rather stiff through the neck and just doesn't really want to get all the way over her back. She's a fantastic mover, and when you get her over her back, she's going to be quite incredible. But at the moment, she's just kind of racing around, bracing through her neck. The best thing I can tell you to start with, this is a kind of horse that's a great candidate for lunging in the shambone if she's not stretching into the contact with the side rein. So I certainly suggest that you go back to the lunging work to start with. Try with just side reins and see if she'll stretch into them. But if not, I would definitely go to the shambone because she's the kind of horse that can really be helped by that a great deal, as she's just kind of bracing with her neck. And if she's been going this way for a long time, it sometimes becomes second nature to horses and hard to get them to stretch into the contact. So I'd certainly go back to the lunging, and I would, as I said, start with the side reins, and if those don't work, I would go to the shambone, which would really help this horse a great deal to get her neck out there and teach her how to use her back a little better, because she's really quite an incredible mover with lots of power, as I can see. She's just not really quite getting there all the way working over her back. So if you're able to accomplish this on your other horses and get them to stretch, it sounds like you're doing the right things. But some horses can be very difficult. Now, the other thing I certainly would do is go back to the walk. In my way of thinking, I never take a horse into the trot that won't stretch in the walk. It's kind of pointless because all they're going to do is run around like this one is doing, sort of bracing upwards on the bridle and not really getting over her back. So we need to just take a step back all the way along here. So go back to lunging. If you don't do that, go back and watch our videos on lunging. And I have also a video on shambone use there. So if you can't get her to stretch into the contact in just the side reins, I would definitely suggest going to the shambone and trying it there. Because this is really quite a phenomenally nice mare. And you talk about taking her out on hills and this kind of stuff. Well, hills and things are great for horses if they're working over their backs. And if they're not, all it does is get the horse to pull more with the shoulders. So once again, the back guides everything in training. And once we realize that, it makes everything a lot easier. So I would go back to the lunging and then go back to just working in the walk and work the walk until you can get the horse to stretch out in the walk. And if you can't, just go back to the lunging. In other words, if you can get her to stretch on the lunge line, once you can get that, then start back in the walk and get her to stretch in the walk. But if you can't do that, then just keep with the lunging. Don't go on to the trot, because every time you take a step and she's upside down, it just encourages her to be upside down. So we need to sort of go back to the beginning and get everything working right and take it one gear at a time, so to speak, being first gear being the walk. So that's what I'd really like to see you do. This horse has lots of potential. She could be an incredible mover, and I can certainly see, as you say, you felt her more over her back before, and you feel that big thrust, which this horse is certainly capable of doing. I like this horse a lot. So let's just take a step back, get her on the lunge line, get her stretching into the contact. I mean, she has moments where she almost gets there for you, but she's just a little bit too stuck in her neck to quite get there at the trot. And of course, she's moving quite rapidly. While I wouldn't say she's quite running, she is one of those big moving horses. She's just kind of pulling herself along by the shoulders a bit. So back to the lunge line work, either in the side reins, if that doesn't work, working in the shambones, and then back to a walk. And only walk until you can get this horse to stretch out in the walk. Then once you can get the stretch in the walk, you should be able to have a lot easier time getting it in the trot and start from there. So that's the approach that I would take to this, because you certainly have a beautiful horse here with lots of potential, if we can just get her working over her back and not just sort of running forward, pulling herself along by her shoulders. So that's the direction we need to go. I mean, I like how you're keeping it simple here in terms of just, you're not doing anything that's too difficult for the horse, that is too small a circles, or asking for lateral work the horse is incapable of doing, that sort of thing. But once you get to the walk work, you do want to get back and go through your lateral work in the walk. We kind of want to think about it, if we think about organizing ourselves through the gears, so to speak, like if you have a horse and once you can get them to stretch and accept contact on the bridle and the lunge line, then you can get on and start the walk work. And then we want to start with the first lateral exercise, which comes before even making a circle. You can't make a circle unless you can leg yield, because every circle should feel like you are leg yielding out onto the size of circle that you want. So once again, you want to start with the walk and just start with that lateral work in the walk. Just a simple leg yield. Simple leg yields that will help you get her a little bit softer and should help you get her deeper into the stretch. Once again, The point is, when the horse leg yields, it steps deeper into the body, and when it's right, you'll feel the horse lift up to the back a little bit. That's how you know your shoulder ins, or, for instance, are working, when you feel the horse lift through the back without shortening the stride. What we see too often with people is that, they're trying to do lateral work, but they end up with the horse at a crawl trying to do it. So we want to keep the horse's stride big and open in the lateral work. And once again, starting with the walk. And don't even think about trying it in the trot if you can't do it in the walk. And then same thing, once you can do it in the walk, then you go up and you may be able to do a correct leg yield in the trot. And as we go through the gears, so to speak, every day, you walk, you might even be doing, leg yields, you might be doing shoulder ins and eventually half passes. But then the trot, you might only be doing leg yields, and then eventually once you can do a good leg yield, then you can begin to do a little shoulder four, which turns into a shoulder in. Shoulder four just means a shoulder in without a lot of bend. Once we can achieve bend, it's a true shoulder in. But I see so much about this horse that I like, and I think if you just take a step back a little bit and sort of think of it as just starting over again, so to speak, and starting from the gears where she can get things going. That is, the lunging and then working in the walk. So that's the best thing I can tell you about this horse, but she certainly looks lovely, and I would love to see another video after you go back and restart what you're doing and do it in that manner. Because I think what will happen here, she seems like the kind of horse that's just, without taking some other steps and taking a step back, she's just never really improving as you're riding here. She's just sort of staying where she is, sort of locked up in the neck and not really getting there. So once again, every step you take with the horse in the wrong frame just re-encourages her to be in the wrong frame. So we need to just take that step back to the lunging work and then into the walk work, and then once we can get that mounted walk work correctly, that we can get her to stretch into the contact and stretch down and out. And you can do plenty of that also once you can get it. The beauty of the walk is you can do a lot of it without hurting the horse, So do a lot of that walk stretched out. And the same thing when you're out on there on those hills. If you can't get the horse to stretch into the contact when you're doing your outside work and up and down hills, it really is having no value for the horse. In fact, it will have a detrimental effect on the horse because she'll be hollow, which means you're putting more pressure on the legs and the hard tissue of the joints. So go back and get it straightened out at the very beginning, and then everything else should come together for you quite easily. But once again, I'll say I like this horse a great deal. And the way you're riding her looks quite good. It's just, but I think you're just stuck in that place where it's just not going to change until you go back and sort of start all over again, starting with the lunging and then the walk work. But once again, I like how you're keeping it to simple things. You're not asking her anything, too terribly difficult here. But it will even improve more if we can go back to the beginning and start all over again. So that's the biggest advice I have for you. Everything else here looks great. In terms of, it looks like a lovely horse. She looks really sound, and and even for as sort of rigid as she is through the neck, she looks, like she really wants to reach under herself. So when you get this horse over her back, you're really going to have something spectacular here, I believe. And as you say in your, you might want to just check your saddle fit and just be sure that, in that jumping saddle, sometimes jumping saddles can be very pinchy around the horse's withers there, and they can restrict the shoulder. And this horse has a big movement, so be sure that the saddle that you're riding is not pinching behind the shoulders. In other words, that the shoulder can swing back and under the saddle without running into a tree point. That is, those old jumping saddles tend to have forward-pointing tree points that cut right into the horse's shoulders. And that can be enough. We change saddles on horses all the time, and we see a huge difference in them. I highly recommend that you look at the Lise saddles. That's what we ride in, and because they are totally adjustable to the horse's back, and you can find one that fits you. You can then have it fit for the rest of your life to whatever horse you ride on. The only time they ever become problematic is if you have a saddle that's too long. Some horses have a very narrow base of very short saddle support area. So, but that's not true of many of them. Generally speaking, if you buy a reasonable saddle that doesn't have big gussets coming out the back of it, which is something that you never want, because once again, when you see these saddles that have the big gussets behind, they tend to shift the weight too far back, and the saddle maker is trying to solve the problem of that of the unbalance of the saddle by just putting these soft gussets back there. But that they just harden up and they dig into the horse's back, so it's just not what you want. So take a look at the Lise saddles and take a look at your own saddle. And if you haven't done so, I suggest that you take a look at the saddle fit videos that we have on our site, so you can get a good idea. You can pretty much tell, once you listen to that lecture on there by my wife, Karen Loshba, you should be able to have a pretty good idea of whether your saddle is fitting or not, because that can really stop a horse from stretching. If you have a horse that's every time it tries to swing its shoulder back, the saddle is too high, too tight behind the shoulders, it's not going to want to stretch. So check those things and be sure that you don't have a problem there. And because it really shouldn't make any difference whether you're riding in a jumping saddle or a dressage saddle. You should be able to do dressage in a jumping saddle just fine until you reach the point where you're doing a lot of sitting trot, which you certainly wouldn't want to do until you get the horse over the back anyway. So I highly recommend that you take a look at the saddle fit and see if that might be part of your problem, because it can be. So check that out, and then once again, if it is a problem, you need to think about, as you are already doing, finding a better fitting saddle than the one that you now have. Yeah, so everything I see here just tells me the same thing. I mean, I love this horse. It's lots and lots of potential, but she's just kind of staying in the same place, and you're just kind of stuck there. I get a little better look at the saddle there. So take a step back, go back to the lunging, go back to the walk work until you can get the horse really stretching in the walk work, and don't go back to the trot until you can. And once you can get those basic steps done in the right order that they need to happen, that is at the walk first on the lunge line, and then at the walk mounted, then you'll have a lot better chance of succeeding here in the trot. Because this horse has a lot of potential, and she kind of softens there for you every while, but you know what she's doing, her neck is very turtled back into her body. So she really needs to lengthen it out from the shoulders. And even when she sort of drops over a little bit for you, which she does occasionally, she doesn't lengthen from the base of the neck, and that's what we have to get her to do. And once again, I do see that often in horses that the saddles don't fit right, because once again, every time that shoulder swings back, if it's running into a tree point on that saddle, in other words, if it's too tight behind the shoulder, that can really stop her. And she's such a big mover that could definitely be something affecting this horse. Because once you go back and get this horse straightened out, I think you're really going to have quite a phenomenal horse here. As to your position, I don't see anything wrong. You're a little bit rounded shouldered, so I'd say just flatten your shoulder blades into your back a little bit. But even that, what you're doing shouldn't have that big effect on what you're doing. I mean, it's more with the horse of just, as you say, you seem to be able to achieve this with your other horses. So we're looking for why is that happening with this horse and not with the other horses. So once again, it's either a matter of she's just so habitually going like this. Once again, you see how convex the bottom of her neck is there. That tells me that she's just pulling herself with her shoulders, as you can kind of see. While she has a lot of engagement, that is a little bit of reach behind and good action, she doesn't really thrust through her back at all. She doesn't really push you forward with her legs. She's more like pulling you along with her shoulders. So we really need to get her to stretch out from that base of the neck, and she should have it'll look like her foot is it'll look like her neck is another foot longer than it is right now, when we finally get her to release that and stretch out forward. So I'd be very curious to see what happens after you do the lunging work with her, and see if that doesn't help. Once again, check out the video on the shambone, because that could be really helpful with a horse like this. And just be sure that you take your time if you're going to use the shambone, as I suggest in the video, that you don't put it on too tight. You give the horse time to adjust to the pole and the pressure on the pole rather. Over a little bit of time, and especially in the walk, that is on the lunge line. So very good work with this horse that has a lot of potential, but now we need to just take a step back, go back to the beginning, and reestablish a few of the foundation exercises so that we can get her neck longer. Everything else you're doing is just fine, so I don't see any problem here. Just check the saddle fit, go back to lunging, and I think your life will be a lot easier. So once again, this is Will Faerber from Art to Ride. I look forward to seeing your next video.